Hi, this is Debbie Cox. I'm a professor and librarian at Gray School of Theology, and today I'm going to be talking about how to do a bibliographic citation. You will hear people talk about bibliography, and you may know already what a bibliography is or what you may not know. Let me tell you briefly what a bibliography is. A bibliography is a page or pages at the end of your paper that contains all of the works that you have cited and the works that you have looked at for a paper that you have completed. So if you write a paper on King David, every book that you read, every book that you read part of, every journal article that you looked at, all of those things will be in the bibliography. Now, if a teacher asks for a works cited list or a reference list, in those cases, the professor is asking for a list of everything that you cited. Works cited means everything that has a footnote, every quote, every paraphrase, every idea that you got from somebody else that you have given a footnote, you have given them credit for writing it, then those works have to be on a works cited page. But if the professor says bibliography, the technical definition of a bibliography includes listing all of the books that you looked at while you were working on this paper or that influenced you. So, or books or journal articles or any other source that you used. So, what I'm suggesting here is that you be sure whether what your teacher wants, whether he or she wants a works cited page or a bibliography, and as I said, some of them will call it a reference list. Because at the end of your paper, you're going to put a list of all those works, and they have to be in a certain format, and they have to be in a certain order. Now, the order for a bibliography is very easy. It's alphabetical by last name. So that is so simple that anybody can remember it. Alphabetical by last name, just ABCs, and you put the last names first because that's how you're alphabetizing. I'm going to show you a title page of a book. On this side of the page on my screen, you will see title page in a book. You go to the title page to find the information that you need about the book to put into your bibliographic citation. How many bibliographic citations will you have? Well, it depends on how many books, magazine articles, journal articles, newspaper articles, how many sources, in other words, you used. So there's no way that I can tell you how many sources you will have. As a professor, I could tell you how many sources I require. I might say you must have 10 sources. Or I might say you must have a minimum of 10 sources, and that's more likely what you will hear from teachers because most teachers don't mind if you use too much research. Most teachers prefer that you use enough research to write the paper well, and that makes perfect sense, doesn't it? So let's take a look at this title page. The first thing on the title page is usually the title of the book, and it's easy to see, and it's almost always in big print. The second thing on the page is often the subtitle, if a book has a subtitle. Now, when you look at the title, The Last Economic Superpower, that's interesting, but it doesn't tell you much about what the book is about. A lot of the time, if a book has a subtitle, it's to give you the gist of the contents. So subtitles are very important, and it's best to put them into your bibliographic citation too. What is a bibliographic citation going to look like? It's going to look like a little paragraph, but there's going to be one major difference, and I'll show you that in a minute. Now, who is this book by? A man named Joseph P. Quinlan wrote this book. He's the author. We also have some additional information here. We have information that it was edited by someone named Gabriel Solomon, and it has a foreword by a man named Thomas Wilson. Now, when it comes to what you put into a bibliographic citation, you need the author. If there is an author, you put the author. But if there is no author, you start with the title. That's true for footnotes, too, if you're ever writing a footnote. You start with the title. But if you have an author, you start with the author. And then we have this extra information edited by Gabriel Solomon with a foreword by Thomas Wilson. You do not need to include that kind of information if you have an author. Now, if you do not have an author, it is acceptable to put a book in by its editor, in which case you would have his name and you would have the letters ED in the citation. And the foreword, you would only quote the foreword if you actually quote that part of the book. You would only cite it if you quote that. If you put in, say, a paragraph that Thomas Wilson wrote in the foreword to the book, then you do give him credit for that. But if you don't use that foreword, and most people don't quote the forewords, if you don't use it, then you don't have to give him any credit. McGraw-Hill Publishers. The publisher is usually cited at the bottom of the page, and it's frequently in big print. Sometimes it has a logo of some kind that is their logo. McGraw-Hill Publishers is listed right here, and beneath it we find where the book was published. Now, McGraw-Hill is a big company, and I have placed 4 of their locations here: New York, Boston, London, and Atlanta. I've many times had calls from people sometimes late at night, because they're working on their bibliography late at night, the night before it's due. And I've had these calls where they say, which city do I use? What do I do? It's got 10 different cities here. And some books do have 10 different publication cities. You choose the first one. Just simply choose the first one and you've solved the problem. The first one is usually the largest one anyway. And this one says New York. So that means the city of New York, New York. And New York is the largest publishing city in the world as far as I know. Now looking down here immediately under all of those, we see copyright. And the copyright is 2010, 2006, and 2005. This means that this publishing company has copyrighted this book 3 times, and these are the 3 dates that they put a copyright. Copyright is legal. It's a legal instrument, and they own the rights to what's in this book. Rights to copyright. You will always use the latest copyright because that's the one that's in force. So there's really wouldn't be any reason for them to do this, but lots of publishers do it. They put all the years that they've ever copyrighted the book. So legally, the one that's in force is the most recent, so you put the year that is the most recent. So we would put 2010, and notice the word copyright here. You don't use the word copyright in a bibliographic citation, and you don't use the little symbol C in a circle that means copyright. You don't need either one of those. The date is sufficient. So that is a typical title page. That's what they tend to look like in any book. Now, bibliographies go at the end of the paper. They are different from footnotes. Footnotes go at the foot, the bottom, of a page. Every footnote goes at the foot of the page. That's why they're called that. It's a design thing. So we go up here, and we're going to create our bibliography. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to center, and I'm just going to type the word bibliography. Now let me tell you about the font. The font for Turabian, this is our Turabian textbook. It's the style manual for every course at Grace School of Theology. And you're going to use Times Roman font for research papers, unless your teacher tells you differently for some reason. Maybe he has bad eyes and he needs a different font. But otherwise, unless otherwise noted, you're going to use Times Roman, New Times Roman. Bibliography is in 12 point, and that is the correct font to use. You need to use, that's the correct size to use for your font. You want to use 12 point. Because we're doing this on screen, and because 12 point looks pretty small to me, we're going to go over here and change it to a larger font. But this is only for the purpose of showing you what it looks like, not for you to do on your own paper. Use Times Roman, New Times Roman, and use the size 12. Now we're going to go down, and I'm going to come out of center because that's just going to hassle me if I try to do a bibliographic citation leaving center on, and it won't be right. Now, 1-inch margins on either side of your page unless your professor tells you differently. Sometimes when a thesis, like a really, really major work paper, is going to be written, then what you're going to want to do is give it 1.5 inch on the left side because it's going to be bound. But unless you know that your document is going to be bound that way, the standard rule is 1 inch on either side, 1 inch at the top, and 1 inch at the bottom of the page. That's standard formatting for research papers and for bibliographies. So bibliography goes the top of the page. There we go. You don't have to skip any lines from the top down. And then you're ready to put in your actual footnote. Now bibliography. Let's say that Thomas Quinlan is the very first person you quoted. It doesn't matter. His name still has to be in the Q's. So you might have something by a man named Abrahams. You might have something by a man named Baker. You might have something by a man named Cantwell. A, B, C. The order for bibliography is alphabetical. That is why we put the author's last name first. Quinlan. So wherever he falls in the bibliography, wherever he falls, whether he falls at near the top or near the bottom, doesn't matter, as long as he's in the proper place for an author whose name starts with Q. Now, a comma is normal and regular punctuation between a last name and a first name in reverse order. And notice that I've used his whole name. Some formats only use initials. Turabian is not one of those. You need to put the author's full first name, and it's okay to use an initial for his or her middle name. If there is no middle name listed on the title page, then no middle name is necessary. The next thing is I put a period. Naturally, you would put a period after a P, that is somebody's middle initial. But there would be a period here even if there were no middle initial, because bibliographies use periods. I like to think of them like beauty marks or freckles. On your face, you have freckles. No, you probably don't, but I do. Lots of freckles. Well, bibliographies have lots of periods, and a period separates each section of major section of the bibliography, one part from another. So here's part one. Part one is the name of the author. Now you might think, well, the P has to have a period, and so it needs another period to be the period for the section. That's not right. Never use more than one piece of end punctuation, and period is end punctuation. So we have his name, and it's in the correct order. Then for a bibliography, footnotes are different. Now the next thing is the name of the book. So I'm just going to type it in from my title page. Many people who are using electronics font will like to cut and paste it in off the page, like you get it out of a journal online or a database online. But remember, your fonts are going to be radically different. This would not be Times Roman 12, would it? So if you do cut and paste it, you still have to check it for the font that's being used, and you have to check it for the capitalization, because capitalization in a bibliography, just like capitalization in a footnote, is title case, which means the important words are capitalized and minor words like prepositions and articles are not capitalized. So I'm just going to type it in. I don't want to mess with changing the font 1,000 times. The last economic superpower. Did I spell it right? No, everybody makes typos. And the proper punctuation in front of a subtitle, any subtitle, is a colon. So that's the right punctuation. T-H-E-R-E-T-R-E-A-T of globalism. Now this will happen to you too, something I'm just about to show you, globalization. The end of American dominance, comma, and what you can do about it. This is a book that is directly quoted in my paper or paraphrased, or I took his idea, and I'm going to put a period. Now, I'm writing my footnote and I noticed something. Notice that I don't have any kind of indentation at all. Bibliographies are different. Their indentation is unique, quite unique. Bibliography citations have something very special, and I'm going to highlight as much of this as I have written, and I'm going to show you what is different about a bibliography's indentation. On my computer, we're going to the Format button. I'm in Microsoft Word on a Macintosh. You go to the Format button, and we go to Paragraph. It might be in a slightly different spot on your computer, but you need to go ahead and find it. It'll be in basically the same place where the spacing, line spacing is. So here's special. What I want to do is change this into a special kind of indentation called hanging, and we'll see what that means. Hanging indentation, okay. What hanging indentation does is it puts the last name out and indents all the other lines. So I have frequently called this, humorously, a backwards paragraph. That's how I think of it, because the last name sticks out and everything else, every other line of what might be thought of as a paragraph is in. I think they do this so that the alphabetical order is very obvious to the reader. So if you come in and you say, I want to know who said that, and his last name was Quinlan, you can just look down the list as fast as possible and you can find it easily. Most of the things here are for the ease of the reader. They're not for the ease of the writer, and you can count on that. Now, the next thing I want to tell you is that you need to italicize the title of books. So I'm just going to highlight that whole thing, go up here in my Microsoft Word program and go to italicize. And now the entire name of the book is correctly italicized. That was easy, wasn't it? If you forget that, most teachers will count off. They'll count off points for that. So you do want to italicize the title of any book, the title of any journal. Now, if it's only the title of an article, it goes in quote marks. And then the title of the journal goes in italics. But for titles of books, they're always italicized. The next thing that we put is the city where the book was published. And make sure you're not in italics anymore, because that wouldn't be right. The book was published in New York. Remember what I told you? No matter how many places of publication there are, you put the first one. And then the name of the publisher is almost always above the city. Lots of people will put the publisher first and then put the city because that's the way it was on the title page. Unfortunately, Turabian doesn't do it that way, and very few formats do. The city goes first, you don't need the state, and then put the name of the publisher. In this case, it's McGraw-Hill. And I'd like you to know that you do not have to use the word publisher or publication company. You do not have to use the word company, and you do not have to use the abbreviation INC. All of those are understood to be just part of a publisher's name, but what you do need to use is the publisher's name itself. So if it just says Thomas Nelson in that spot, Thomas Nelson is the publisher. If it just says McGraw-Hill, McGraw-Hill is the publisher. You do not have to include any of those extraneous words. McGraw-Hill is enough information. If you don't know whether it's a publisher or not, you need to probably look it up on the internet or contact your librarian or your professor to find out if it's a publishing company. Now, the next thing we do is put a comma, and for a book, we put the year. So this book, we remember, was published, no, it was copyrighted in 2010, the last time, and we always use the latest date, 2010. So that is a correct bibliography entry for a physical book. So if you had the book in your hands, this was a real physical book, not on the internet, this is the complete entry for the book on your bibliography page. Anything that you forget in here, any piece of punctuation, any place of publication put in the wrong place, or any date put in the wrong place can be counted off. Starting with the first name of the writer is completely wrong in a bibliography, even though it's right in a footnote, and so that could be counted off. What you want to do is write a correct bibliography so that everything in its proper place and it can be recognized as a bibliography entry. What you don't want to do is what I just did, and that is play with the indentions, because when you do, it'll mess it up for you. Instead, I'm going to go back. Do you remember where I did this? Go to Format, go to Paragraph, and go back to Hanging Indention. Another thing that I would like you to notice about hanging indention format is that it should be set to 0.5 here in this blank. 0.5 inch. That's a ½ inch. If yours says anything else, just change it. Change it to 0.5 and it will be correct, because that is exactly how it should be, 0.5. And say OK. Yay! Easy fix. Not easy if you can't find hanging indentions. So find that first before you try to do this bibliography. And also, don't try to do your entire bibliography in one night. You'll be very sorry if you do. Now, what if you used an electronic book? Then you do have to add a little bit of extra information, but it's not very much. What you have to add is the word accessed, and it's capitalized in a bibliography. Interestingly enough, it's not capitalized in a footnote. And that's because it follows a comma in a footnote, but it follows a period in a bibliography. Accessed, the date it was accessed, which you can spell completely out, November 11th, and we're going to say that we accessed this a few years ago, 2011. And then we're going to, and notice that I'm looking at my book. I'm looking at my book to get this perfect. And you should do that too. Your book is the Manual of Style by Kate Turabian. Most of us just call it the Turabian Handbook or the Turabian Manual. And that's what you want to use. So after 2011, I put a period, and I put the database that we got this from. So we have, in our database collection here at Grace School of Theology, we have the database ProQuest. And that's where I got this book. When I didn't have the book in my hand, I actually used an electronic resource. So I put the name of the database, a period, and I'm finished. So really, I only had to add 2 extra things to the electronic version, and that is a correct citation. It would be in the Q's, so if you had a book by Mr. Anderson, perhaps Dr. David Anderson, he would be up in the A's, and this one would be alphabetically where it belonged in the list of sources. All of this is very detailed in the same sense that you have a nose on your face in one place and eyes on another and ears in another. If you were to take all these things that are in the bibliography and just put them in there in any order whatsoever, it's not going to look like a bibliography entry any more than your face would look like a human face if you had an ear where your nose is supposed to be. So bibliographies have a certain form, they have a way that they're supposed to be written, and they are recognized as bibliographies by that. This is a bibliography citation. The entire list is the bibliography. I'd like to thank you for being so attentive, and I hope that this has helped you. If not, or if you didn't get enough help, my name is Debbie Cox. I'm at Grace School of Theology, and I'll be happy to help you.